However, this story begins with our protagonist, lost in thought. Despite knowing everything that would happen in the game, the girl before him was still the one he admired most in his past life. He was ecstatic. Alexandra de Chevalier, the character from the game that he adored the most. She looked at him with a sweet smile and puppy dog eyes. This was the world he was in now. The world they were in came from a game called Inkiyazer, a chat-based RPG filled with comedy, romance, and adventure. In this game, they were supposed to become heroes, defeat villains, and ultimately save the world. But he wasn't a player anymore. He had been reborn as Harold Welty Alvis, a High Lord of the Alvis Nation, one of the most powerful countries in the north. Harold was now a nobleman. Harold was a talented but arrogant man, destined to be destroyed by the game's powerful heroes. He was known by all as a scumbag and a villain. Our protagonist woke up one morning to find he had become this very character. Focusing, he recalled the memories of his past life. It felt like something out of a novel. In his previous life, his name was Tachibana Aru, a quiet and reserved college student with few friends. He didn't get along well with others, so he spent most of his time playing video games. That's how he discovered Inkiyazer. After pouring countless hours into it, he was now trapped, living as Harold Welty Alvis, the most hated villain in the game's history. In the original storyline, Harold constantly antagonized and challenged the protagonist, but his schemes ultimately failed, and he met a grim end. He didn't want to meet that fate. He realized he was currently only 13 years old, and the game's main story wouldn't start until he turned 16. That gave him a 3-year window to change his destiny. Knowing every secret the game held, he decided to rewrite the story of his own fate. He vowed to survive and even save the one person he cared about most. Chapter 1. The Villain's Gambit. With some clothes that made him look a bit arrogant, he asked his maids what they thought. They just smiled sweetly and said he looked good, but he didn't believe them. She looked very dignified. In his past life, he always chose the black color scheme, so he felt uncomfortable with a white uniform. He called for his maid to bring him a change of clothes. He couldn't feel confident unless he was wearing black. After changing into the familiar black uniform, he felt a surge of confidence. Now, he truly looked the part of the villain, Harold. A maid called out to him and handed him a sword. At that moment, he remembered something. One day, he remembered seeing a girl crying in a tower. He had offered her his hand and told her she shouldn't cry anymore. When he saw her smile, he had said, "Please, at least tell me your name." And with that, Harold hurried to the meeting. Her father, the Duke, was happy to see him and said it was good he was there. Harold just apologized for being late. Then, a girl approached him. A girl stepped forward and greeted him. Instantly, Harold recognized her. In his past life, Alexandra was the daughter of Duke Chevalier, the most influential nobleman in the Albus Kingdom. She was also one of the main heroines, but unlike the others, she had no special powers, despite appearing early on. In the game, she was called beautiful, but her strange personality and unfeminine demeanor made many people hesitant to even call her a lady. Her blunt honesty and obsession with swordsmanship were off-putting to the other nobles, who expected a delicate flower. But to him, those were her greatest strengths. Even so, Harold, in his past life, had liked her character more than anyone else. There was a long, optional route where she expressed her desire for the player to simply talk with her. It was a small moment, but it was etched into Harold's heart. And now, he decided he wouldn't become a villain in this world. Instead, he wanted to live and survive alongside her. Alexandra looked at him, completely stunned. She stared at him, surprised by the way he was looking at her, so Harold quickly turned away. His father laughed, saying his son was captivated by her beauty, and then sent them to a banquet together. During their meeting, he said to her, "Harold noticed that no one was speaking and understood that he hadn't yet earned Alexandra's trust. If their engagement went poorly, everything could get worse. He called out to her. He addressed her by name, but she responded with self-deprecation. Harold acknowledged that his reputation wasn't good and guessed she didn't have a high opinion of him either. He then bluntly stated that if she wished, she could break off their engagement, since he was sure she didn't consider him a worthy partner. Alexandra seemed hurt by his words and asked what he meant. In a tone full of arrogant confidence, Harold told her to just give him 3 years. In that time, he would make himself into a man she could be proud of. His words left her completely surprised, and so he began to pursue her. So he bowed his head and told her that if in 3 years he still wasn't worthy, he would ask the Duke to dissolve the engagement himself. He sincerely asked her to give him a chance. She looked at him in silence for a moment. Finally, she said she understood and would decide if his feelings were genuine. Alexandra called for her maid, Monica, who brought over a wooden sword and a shield. Harold didn't understand what was happening. So, Alexandra explained, she would attack him with all her strength, and he just had to block her first strike. Harold felt cornered. The task seemed impossible, but as he hesitated, she looked at him with a serious expression and replied that if he couldn't even do this, then perhaps his words meant nothing at all. Harold agreed and took the sword and shield. Alexandra nodded, a determined look on her face. Harold braced himself for her attack. Just try to stay calm. Imagine it's just you and me here. We need a location, and we think we can pull it off. With a powerful shout, Alexandra lunged forward. The attack was so heavy that Harold was thrown back, dropping the shield. Alexandra approached and stood before him. He was still on the ground, feeling a mix of fear and surprise. And then he noticed something strange. However, she said that his resolve had reached her, which made him happy. She smiled and said she was looking forward to seeing what kind of man he would become in those 3 years. Her words made Harold feel happy and relieved. Alexandra turned and signaled for her carriage to be brought around. As the carriage departed, Harold also felt a sense of relief. He thought that this was the first step toward a better future. He was truly determined to improve himself over the next 3 years. Meanwhile, in the carriage, Alexandra's face was completely flushed. She couldn't believe what she had just done. She confessed to her maid that she had been in love with Harold from the moment she met him, and now she had finally confronted him. The maid seemed happy that the engagement was going well. She told her lady that she was glad everything with the young lord turned out fine, but also reminded her that she should try to act more like a proper lady. Alexandra replied that even if the engagement was safe for now, she still didn't know what the future held. However, even if the engagement was secure, she needed a little more reassurance, at least from someone who knew her true feelings. So, the maid found a way to help. She presented a white mask, and Alexandra looked at it in surprise. The maid told her that in the original story with Harold, his character profile also turned black at some point. She confirmed that his alignment had shifted to evil. She said that if Harold ever found out the reason his profile turned black, the engagement could be destroyed. This worried Alexandra, as she didn't want to lose him. The maid promised to be more careful and suggested she at least smile at the boy or try to look happy when she met him. Alexandra quickly replied that she knew that was impossible. She had already tried. The maid knew it too. Alexandra was not good at socializing, and her strong personality wasn't what people expected from someone in her position. Alexandra was also aware of her situation. She knew she didn't act like a proper lady. She reflected on how everyone talked behind her back, labeling her as a villainess, someone to be pitted. Still, her maid was confident, having seen Harold block one of her attacks. Alexandra revealed that she had used her Serpent's Flash technique in that duel, and the maid replied that Harold had still managed to block it. Harold had blocked the blow by changing the shield's angle and redirecting the impact. That move nullified the force of the strike and made it easy to defend. The maid laughed, thinking Harold probably didn't even realize what an incredible feat he had accomplished. She was also confident that no one could be a better partner for her lady than him. After all, he was the one who, in the past, had given her a sword to help her escape the tower, a moment that meant the world to her. At that time, meanwhile, Harold was wondering what to do next. He knew that the world he was in had a level-up system, and if he fought a battle right now, he would lose. He felt trapped. Even after asking Alexandra for 3 years to prepare, his stats were still trash. He had decent attack and physical strength, but everything else was below average. His character's affinity was darkness, but all his skills were light-based, so he was terribly inefficient. In other words, his combat power was abysmal. Harold had a lot of knowledge. The real challenge was transferring the skills from Tachibana Aru's memories into his new body. So, he decided the first step was to master a weapon. A few moments later, a maid entered the room and announced that she would be taking care of him from now on. The maid introduced herself as Marion. In the game, Marion was a sharp-tongued but ultimately loyal character. She served as a supporting figure, but her fate was one of the many tragedies Harold was determined to prevent, and told him he could ask her for anything he needed. Reluctantly, Harold thanked her. As she walked away, she muttered under her breath that he had a terrible personality and closed the door behind her. Harold began to reflect on his own character. Perhaps he only seemed arrogant on the surface, but deep down, he was easily intimidated by those stronger than him. After all, he was nicknamed the Cowardly Villain. Acting like this wasn't easy, but it was necessary for his plan. But it helped him keep a low profile. He could avoid attention and live a quiet life with his future wife, which was what he truly wanted. He also thought that in 3 years, he would be able to become a worthy man for her. He might end up changing Marion's fate. He just hoped she wouldn't be surprised by his actions. There was one thing the game never revealed: Marion's ultimate fate, produced by the Amara.org community. However, he tried to get his parents' permission to train, but his parents said that without a proper tutor, it was impossible. They considered his training to be just a childish whim, and that he should be focusing on his studies instead. A few nights later, Harold was having dinner when his father announced he had found a tutor for him, and gave his maid a towel to wipe his face. But Marion didn't respond. He realized it had been a week since she started working for him, and she still hadn't gotten used to her job. He felt she was being disrespectful. He then went to the training grounds to practice. However, in this world, to level up, one had to train their physical body far more rigorously. Despite his efforts, he saw no progress. His swings were clumsy, and his stamina was pathetic. He felt like he was getting nowhere. He felt frustrated. At this rate, he thought, I'll never get stronger. I can't keep this up. I have to find a better way and start using magic. But before that, he wanted to level up his physical abilities. That would be the most useful thing in a battle. So, he decided to continue training with the sword. Just then, Marion appeared and chuckled a bit. He had failed to swing, proving he hadn't gotten any better. Harold just replied that she was imitating someone with that laugh. Someone with no real strength. Hearing that, Marion said she would help him train because she thought he had potential. Harold thought that maybe she was a powerful warrior. His stats, like Alexandra's, were quite terrible. Marion, coming from a family of knights, was also very strong. He figured that if he trained with someone like her, he might get stronger. So, he asked if she would be willing to teach him, and she agreed. It was no problem at all. The two of them got ready, and Harold struck first. Marion commented that his attack was weak, and parried his strike, sending him flying. Toward him, she looked at him with a condescending expression and told him he truly was a useless and cowardly villain. He got back up, and had been completely defeated. She asked if he felt bad for being beaten by a simple maid. Inwardly, Harold agreed that he was weak and had no special skills. But it was precisely because of that he didn't want to give up. Please support us and subscribe to the channel for more content. Just then, another figure appeared, stopping the spar. She introduced herself as Monica Aston. She announced that, from that day forward, she would be Harold's new personal attendant. Seeing her, Harold was surprised, knowing that Monica was supposed to be working for Alexandra. Marion also looked stunned, saying she hadn't heard anything about a transfer. Monica informed her that she was being dismissed from her position. Furthermore, she was to report to the head maid for reassignment. Marion then left, fuming. Monica then explained that since Harold was engaged to her lady, she would be serving him as his personal maid. Therefore, her lady had sent her ahead to get Harold accustomed to her presence. She then bowed respectfully and said she would take care of him from now on. Harold was flustered. A short while later, Marion returned, furious, demanding to know why they did that to her. Monica told her. Monica replied that she had reported her rude behavior towards Harold. For that reason, she was no longer needed near him. Marion left, screaming, vowing she would never forget what happened. Harold felt a little guilty about the whole thing, so he couldn't say anything. So, Monica told him to return to his room so she could treat his wounds. After she helped him, Harold felt relieved. Monica was the first person to treat him with kindness, and he responded gratefully. He didn't want to dismiss her, but he told her. But she had done everything. However, she had been too proactive in searching his room. She replied that since Harold was the young master, she thought she should anticipate things that a young master would typically require. When she found nothing, she assumed it was because he hadn't acquired them yet. Harold made it clear that he wasn't hiding anything. So, she suggested acquiring those items for him since he didn't have them yet. That made him panic, and he asked her not to do anything unnecessary. Still, he said he would tell her from now on what he needed. Monica seemed to understand and also asked him to tell her. The next day, Harold was eating when Monica entered and informed him that his brother, Cardis, wanted him to have dinner with him that day. Harold was surprised. Back in his previous life, he had always tried to get his mother's approval, which led him to wonder if he got along well with Cardis. He thought that Cardis, in his life, in general, he knew that their relationship was strained. But now, Harold thought that wasn't a good thing. So, he told Monica to arrange his attendance at the dinner. Later, on the training grounds, Harold practiced as usual. Some time had passed, but he didn't feel like he was getting any stronger. He had made a promise to Alexandra. When he opened his eyes, he saw her there, watching him in silence. Alexandra thanked him for his hard work. Harold, surprised, became flustered and asked why she had come. She reminded him that it had been a month since they last met. Because they were engaged, they should meet and talk more often. Otherwise, people would start a gossip. So, instead of waiting for him to visit her, she decided to visit him. Please subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our exciting videos. Harold realized he hadn't thought about that. Alexandra asked with a firm tone for him to be more considerate in the future. Although Harold had promised to become a man worthy of her, he couldn't believe he had forgotten about the most important person, Alexandra. He knew he had to prioritize her, even if it made him feel awkward. So, he recalled that the Chevalier territory was far from the capital, but Alexandra explained that since their engagement, she had moved to a residence nearby where he lived. Harold was surprised. She added that, if he wanted, he could come see her any time. Harold didn't expect her to do so much for him. She began. He started to wonder if she could have feelings for him, even just a little. But he also told himself not to get his hopes up. After all, it was only the second time they had met. Alexandra then informed him that she was just practicing her sword swings. Harold replied to her that it was because of the cold. He couldn't tell her the real reason. He was training with all his might to live up to his promise to her. He wanted to talk to her but felt he didn't have the right to. His own training, so no one noticed? Not before, not now. Alexandra then mentioned something that happened a month ago, which had been bothering her. She had surprised Harold. She said she knew he was working hard to fulfill the promise he made. Hearing that, Harold finally confessed the truth. He said his efforts were meaningless. No matter how much he trained his body, his stats barely increased. The wall he was facing seemed insurmountable, and the future looked just as bleak as it did in the game. Harold confessed to Alexandra, so she asked if she could help him with his training. Harold was surprised, but replied that it was something he could only dream of. He confessed that all his efforts were for her sake. Alexandra asked if he thought she wasn't good enough. Harold said she wasn't a bother at all. He bowed his head towards her and took her hand. He told her that he was training by himself and couldn't let her train by herself. Why? He also said he would feel bad for wasting her time. Alexandra smiled and reminded him that he was her fiancé, so he shouldn't worry about that. They both smiled, and Harold thanked her. So, she stepped forward and announced that it was time to begin their training. Harold looked surprised. Alexandra picked up a wooden sword and told him that if he could block one of her attacks before, he must have gotten much stronger to do it again. She told him to get ready, while he still didn't understand everything. She relentlessly attacked him, pushing him to his limits. After a while, Alexandra announced that she would come back the next day because it was getting late. Harold was left there, confused and unsure about what had just happened. Alexandra said there were only 3 years left, so they couldn't waste a single day. Harold wondered if she was being serious. 3 difficult years awaited him, and if he didn't level up during that time, his future as Harold would be just as tragic as it was in the game. And protected Harold. Monica said she would treat his wounds and help him rest so that he would feel better the next day. He gratefully accepted, but Alexandra said he shouldn't take too long. So, Monica told Alexandra to go back quickly, because Harold had been summoned to a dinner, and if he wasn't quick, he would be late. Hearing this, Alexandra was upset because no one had told her about the dinner. Monica replied apologetically that, for some reason, she hadn't been invited. Monica didn't want to go because her lady was still there, but her lady insisted. Before leaving, Alexandra called out to Harold and asked him to tell her what happened when he returned. Harold then left the estate. After getting ready, Harold departed very quickly. When they finally arrived, they apologized for being late, but someone said they had been waiting. The man was his older brother, Cardis Vel Obald, the first prince of the kingdom. As for why Cardis was so wary of everyone, it was because the succession to the throne was a chaotic and bloody affair where brother turned against brother. However, Harold's attitude couldn't be interpreted as having any particular feelings. The Obald royal family was a cold place. The first prince treated Harold like a useless younger brother. Still, Harold continued to follow him in the hopes that one day Cardis would notice him. He felt that if that happened, his mother would finally see him too. But in truth, he knew his mother would never be able to see him that way. What was Harold supposed to say to that? He just bowed his head in silence. To celebrate his engagement to the daughter of the ducal Chevalier family, Harold thought his brother just wanted to use this to secure the support of the Chevaliers. Were the Chevaliers in a different faction? As it was said, they were the most influential noble family. With their help, Cardis could join the race for the throne. But this time, Harold had no intention of being a pawn for his brother. And at that moment, another prince approached them with a glass of wine. They exchanged a few curt words, and the man moved on, and congratulated Harold. It was Raphael Beldiobald, the second prince. Although he had a good public image, he was a cunning and talented man. He was a major obstacle in Cardis's path to the throne. Therefore, he was also opposed to Cardis, the son of the fourth queen. Since Harold was seen as useless, Raphael had no problem with him. Cardis, on the other hand, treated him coldly. But Cardis didn't believe Raphael only came to congratulate him. Raphael, in a mocking tone, asked if he might have planned everything. He was aware of Raphael's situation. Thank you for watching, and see you again. Harold had heard from a maid that Raphael had once proposed an engagement to the Chevalier family, but had been rejected. Harold was surprised to hear that. Raphael confirmed it, and said that if he knew how things would turn out, he would have tried harder. He glanced at Harold, as if mocking him for succeeding where he had failed. Cardus replied that he could do that. Hearing them talk about their engagement as if it were some simple transaction, Harold wondered. He had had enough. The other two asked him what was wrong. Harold said he wasn't feeling well and excused himself. He thanked them for the day and left. Outside the dining hall, Harold was deep in thought. He realized that even things he had previously thought were simple matters of romance had changed since he regained his memories. He knew this kind of political maneuvering was normal in this world, but he didn't want to be a part of it. Someone using a girl as a weapon to succeed, even if it was for a noble cause. In the game, Harold had killed Alexandra, his own fiancée, just so she could become a stepping stone for someone else. He clenched his fists, the memory filling him with disgust. He didn't want to make that mistake again. He decided to fight on his own terms, not just to survive, but also to make sure Alexandra would never have to feel sad again. As he was about to leave, someone called out to him. It was the fourth prince, Wilfred Weltebaltz, the main protagonist of Inkiyazer. He possessed no special power, so they called him God's Forsaken, and others nicknamed him the Stained Prince because his mother was the king's mistress. In the past, Harold had used that fact to mock him. But now Wilfred bowed his head to him, thanking him for his engagement, and asked him if he was really okay with that. Wilfred smiled and gave a sincere thank you. Harold couldn't believe it. He wondered if there wasn't a reconciliation route, like in the game. Then he noticed someone for a reason, and someone else standing behind Wilfred. It was Marion, who had become Wilfred's maid, just as could happen in the game. Now Harold understood why she had been so difficult before. Wilfred, the main protagonist, was treated even worse than him. Please subscribe to the channel for more new videos. She had become his servant. She said she was grateful. Marion also thanked him, saying she was happy to be working for the person she admired. Harold had no choice but to accept the situation. Later, Alexandra couldn't believe it. How could this be? She wondered. How can you be so confident in him? It was hard to believe that someone like the Stained Prince, along with the daughter of a disgraced noble family, was bowing to Harold. She even thought of using the Chevalier family's power to retaliate. But Harold asked her not to. Alexandra told Harold he should try harder to ensure his own survival. But despite all his training, Harold was still seen as weak. If this were just a game, there might have been other options. Easily getting better with money. Alexandra started to worry and thought there must be a better way to help him level up. She decided that the first step was to find a weapon worthy of him. In the game, Harold's main weapon was a spear. However, now, Harold wanted to use a shield. Alexander found this interesting. For the past month, Harold had been clear about his choice. The shield was usually used by knights, with some good talent points that focused on defense. In truth, it was a good fit for someone like Harold. But the real reason Harold chose a shield was that one time he had managed to block one of Alexander's attacks with it. That moment of success, that small bit of pride he felt, stuck with him and helped him make his decision. Alexander said the shield was an excellent choice. She felt that one day Harold would be called a mighty and unbreakable shield bearer. She took his hand and promised to help him get stronger. Then she went to find him, a special blacksmith who could forge a weapon worthy of him. Harold looked worried, but she told him to trust her. She praised Harold for his training. She noted that he had gotten much better in the last 3 months. She said that a normal opponent wouldn't be able to land a single blow on him. Harold had endured tough training every day. Still, he could only block about 20% of her attacks. Alexandra told him he needed more training. Although it was only 20%, no one else could block her strikes. In fact, in her entire household, only Monica could. However, he had endured the training well. She was worried because Harold was focusing so much on training and neglecting his studies. Harold told her not to worry. He couldn't say it, but as a former college student, he was confident about his studies, believing he could keep up. Alexandra understood and told him the training was over for the day. Then happily left. Please subscribe to the channel for more new videos. Later, as they were having tea, Harold asked her to help him find a good shield for him. He said he wanted a special shield, the subjugator Kasparvik. Alexandra and Monica were shocked. Alexandra explained that this shield could only be obtained by defeating the Kasparvik, a monster that lived on the Isle of Mon. She said that no single warrior had ever been able to defeat it. Monica then urged Harold to reconsider. She told Harold that not only was it difficult to obtain the shield, but he could also lose his life in the process. But Harold insisted that shield was the only one for him. He couldn't imagine using any other. That shield was the only one for someone like him, who had a dark affinity. The only one for him. The way to get the shield was to defeat the sub-chieftain Kasparvik. The shield had a special skill called Snatch, which could launch long-range attacks with blades of dark magic, create powerful barriers, and retrieve the weapon from a distance. Harold knew that it was impossible to do it alone, so he asked for their help, even though it might be a difficult task. They said it was fine if he decided to give up. Alexandra replied that she was just worried about him. They looked at each other for a moment, and finally, she relented. She would go with him. Harold understood what she wanted, but they asked him not to do anything reckless and to follow their instructions during the fight. Relieved, Harold accepted, and so their expedition was set. They all went to the Isle of Mon. Before they started their search, a small girl appeared, warning them not to enter her people's territory. Harold thought that maybe the child had wandered off somewhere. A young girl was the beast they were looking for. Alexandra said that a Kasparvik was supposed to be as big as a lion. Monica agreed a young girl couldn't be it. The girl warned them again that her father was dead. Harold picked her up and asked her if it was true. The girl revealed that she was, in fact, the Kasparvik they were looking for. However, she was still young and not the great beast of legend. She explained that a greater monster had invaded their land and killed her mother. So Harold wanted to know why she didn't look like a monster. The Kasparvik girl was hungry and asked if they really knew about her kind. She said that Kasparviks were strong and noble. Harold asked if she knew anything about the subjugator Kasparvik shield. The girl replied that. Harold replied that he would help them, but only if they did something for him first. Harold asked what he wanted. Kasparvik replied that someone had entered his territory and had to be driven out. Harold didn't expect that. Please remember to hit the subscribe button for more content. Harold didn't want to endanger the people he cared about. He decided he couldn't help a monster without considering what was at stake. But the girls wanted to help Kasparvik. They wanted to find out which villain was causing trouble and promised they could handle it. Harold reminded them to retreat if the situation became too dangerous. Kasparvik didn't object and let them proceed. Soon after, the hunt began. The group encountered a grotesque and corrupted beast. It had beautiful sky blue fur, but its body was twisted and monstrous. Its eyes were stitched shut, and it looked like a failed chimera. It might be some kind of demon beast. Once, it had been a sacred beast, a messenger of the gods. Now, it had been corrupted into a powerful monster called the gluttonous Inzwin, a boss-level threat. Monica advised that they should run, but before anyone could move, the Kasparvik charged at the monster, roaring that it would avenge its mother. Despite being blind, the Inzwin easily dodged the Kasparvik's attack and struck it down. Harold didn't know what to do. If they let Kasparvik die, they wouldn't get their shield, and if he died, all his plans for survival would be ruined. But there was still one last idea, an idea that didn't require the shield. You could say he wanted to give up before and just follow the path that was written for the character named Harold. But now, he didn't want that anymore. He stepped forward and simply told the beast to take its hands off Kasparvik. In that moment, the beast flinched. The beast was attacked by Alexandra and Monica and let out a roar of pain. Alexandra praised Harold for his bravery. "That was reckless," she said, "but incredibly brave, with someone so kind and sweet as him." Still, he admitted that he liked that part of him. Alexandra and Harold looked at each other and smiled as if they were in their own world. Monica couldn't believe she had to continue serving someone like Alexandra. So, she tried to find a way to help her. So Harold told Kasparvik that they would defeat the enemy together. Kasparvik nodded and joined the fight. The beast was incredibly fast in its attacks, but for Harold, who trained every day against Alexandra's swift movements, all of Alexandra's attacks seemed to be in slow motion. He just needed to block long enough for the girls to attack. The girls unleashed a barrage on the beast. The monster reeled back, stunned by the coordinated assault. Harold saw his chance. "Now," he yelled. He charged forward, shield raised, ready to deliver a powerful blow. The beast swiped at him with its massive claws, but Harold stood his ground and was heavily burned, unable to get up after being hit. "I hope I can use the black shield of Sabachi Kasperi." Meanwhile, Kasparvik spoke to him in a sad voice and called him a brave human. Harold said his name was Harold and asked him if this was where the shield was. He said he could defeat the beast if he had the shield. Kasparvik was in pain, but Harold insisted. In the end, Kasparvik agreed, but he asked them not to use his real name as it was a source of pride and he was not yet at his full power. Kasparvik was enveloped in light and transformed into a shield. Harold was surprised to see the shield was the size of a buckler. Kasparvik said that was the best he could do. He explained that, unlike his mother, he was still a child and didn't have much power. So Harold understood why Kasparvik didn't want his shield form to be called by his mother's name from the start. It was still an incomplete version, without a proper understanding of mana. In the game, Harold knew that only the stats HP, SP, attack, defense, magic defense, and agility existed. There was nothing like mana. Kasparvik was surprised to learn that mana was a power that he didn't know about, since humans also used it. Harold said he didn't have any mana potions or anything like that. Meanwhile, Alexandra had changed, and he found a way to explain it to him. He said that mana was something that all living beings possessed that could be transferred from one person to another, and that it was needed to use skills or magic. He was sure Harold had heard of it before. So, Harold finally understood that in this world, SP was called mana and skills were called arts. With a small smile, he asked Kasparvik if mana could be shared. Kasparvik replied that it was possible to receive mana from others, but explained that it wasn't. He said that he needed some blood to synchronize with his mother's magic and create the true subjugator Kasparvik shield. It was a large amount of blood, and if he took all of Harold's, he could run out of energy and be destroyed. Harold joked, asking if Kasparvik was worried about him. Then, he told him he would give all of his blood and find everything he needs. Thank you for following our channel. Kasparvik tried to warn him again, but Harold urged him to do it quickly. So the transfer began. Parvik wrapped around his arm and told him not to blame him if anything went wrong. Meanwhile, Monica was in danger. The beast's claw had grazed her. Alexandra rushed to help her and started fighting. She told herself she had to stay strong. Before the beast could strike the girls again, Harold jumped out. The shield on his arm glowed with a dark, powerful energy and asked if they were okay. He said he would hold the beast and asked them to take the opportunity to kill it. The girls replied that they would take care of it. Harold saw a fearsome monster, amazed at how the monster fought in front of him. In the game, all weapons except shields added attack power to the user, but this shield was different. And if someone used them, they shared the same name as the shield, their stats would be reversed. So, the Subjugator Kasparvik shield that Harold was now holding had a defensive power equivalent to that of an SSS rank warrior. Therefore, he was able to block the monster's attack with ease. Alexandra and Monica took the opportunity to strike, but the beast, like a snake, whipped its tail around, aiming for a surprise attack. The attack was too fast for them to dodge in time. Harold stood in front of them and blocked the attack, determined to protect them. The man fought to save the others from danger, putting his own life on the line. He wouldn't back down, not now, not ever. When the fight was over, Harold announced that he had endured their attack, a full power attack, holding nothing back, and said he did well. She said that from now on, she would take over. But inside, he was terrified. His eyes had turned red with fury at the thought of the one he loved getting hurt. Harold was furious, seeing Alexandra in danger. He said he would handle it. He felt the organs in his body rattling. Despite the immense damage, he held on, his resolve unshaken. He went to Kasparvik and told him it was time to fight alongside his mother. Kasparvik asked him how to do that. Harold replied that he should already know, now that he could feel the power in his veins. From there, Kasparvik unleashed an attack on him using a power called Snatch, another special skill of the Subjugator Kasparvik shield. He snatched away the enemy's everything, even its life. The beast died in an instant. After the battle, Harold helped honor the mother of Sabache Kasparvik. Please subscribe to the channel to follow our new videos. They were happy, but Harold remembered Kasparvik's warning. Kasparvik himself didn't seem to remember the warning, but Harold remembered it clearly, which was now here with a bit of his blood. He asked, if another dangerous beast appeared, what would he do? Harold knew that Kasparvik was weak, so he played his next card. He sighed and said that he had found a good partner. Kasparvik was surprised and couldn't believe he had found a good partner, and asked if he was being serious. He said he didn't have much power, but Harold explained he could help him with that, since he had a lot to share. He also said he couldn't use any other weapon if it wasn't Kasparvik. He thought their meeting was fate, so that the two of them could become stronger together. Kasparvik's eyes lit up, and joked that Harold would be useless without him. Then, he agreed to help him and called him his partner. On the way back, he said to him, Alexandra couldn't stop smiling. She asked Monica if she had seen how amazing Harold was. Monica said she had, but also asked why Alexandra didn't finish the beast from the start. Alexandra replied that Monica could have done it too, but Monica reported that she didn't see the beast's opening this time in her eyes, and it was all because Harold had held back his final attack. Alexandra felt incredibly happy to see her fiancé getting stronger, especially since he had defeated a beast stronger than her. Monica agreed. She recalled that when a monster as notorious as Inzwin appeared, it was supposed to trigger a response from the local army. But somehow, Harold had defeated it on his own. Now, she understood why her lady was so fond of him. She still didn't know. And so, Alexandra felt a little jealous because Harold was now so close with Kasparvik. Monica remembered that at first, Alexandra seemed happy for him. But now, she was very jealous to see him call the shield his partner, even though she was happy for him. Harold had been with her. Alexandra held tightly to his sword, making her think it had been 7 years since Harold had saved her. The world of Diabald was a cruel world, and though years had passed, that girl continued to protect the kingdom. During that time, the Ovalt family ruled the kingdom, and the family that supported them as their dragon was the Chevalier family. Because the royal family was so young, people often forgot the debates about who should rule. Monica smiled as she remembered a story her mother told her. In the past, Harold had given Alexandra a sword with a beautiful snake carving, and she had accepted it. To Monica, The image of that carving seemed to signify that Harold wanted the body of a snake, and Alexandra, by accepting the sword, had treated it as a bond between the two of them. But this opportunity had been missed. The problem was, only Alexandra thought that way. Monica was sure that the young boy didn't understand the meaning of the gesture, and was even embarrassed when she remembered he had given her his hand. But still, that didn't matter to Alexandra. She had told Alexandra. She had spent 6 years training to get to this point, to finally be able to stand near him and protect him. The Chevalier family believed that strength was freedom, and they possessed a family heirloom called Bumung, the dragon-slaying sword, which could only be wielded by the family's strongest member. Therefore, her lady had focused on her training to become strong enough to protect the boy and stay by his side. She also knew that was why he had been training so hard. She was raised to protect him. Alexandra believed in her, and Monica protected her. She was ready to lay down her life if necessary. She wanted to protect everyone, not just her lady, but also the one who had once called her beautiful. Later, Kaspardak enjoyed eating fish, while Harold told him not to eat too much. After the battle, the two had decided to give each other nicknames as a sign of their new partnership. Kaspardak started calling him Al, and he called it Cass. But this had caused a problem. Harold's future bride was jealous. Harold was at a loss. He couldn't believe Cass had become his partner first, even in that. He felt very flustered. Please subscribe to the channel for more information. Meanwhile, Harold's meal was interrupted. Monica arrived with important news. Then, the next morning, during training, Alexandra learned Harold had been invited to a banquet by the Markle family. As she spoke, Harold sat on the ground, completely stiff. The Markle family were powerful merchants with immense wealth and political influence. In the original story, their support was a key factor in the struggle for the throne. Frederica, the eldest daughter of the Markle family, was one of the game's heroines. Also, she was engaged to Cardis. Harold didn't want to go, knowing Cardis would be there. So, Alexandra mentioned that she had also been invited. They thought the family wanted to see them together, as they could be a political family in the future. She asked if that was the case. Still, she thought it was polite to interact with people who could become part of her family. She also understood that others might be interested in them. She asked Alexandra what she thought they should do. She replied that, "Thank you for watching, and please subscribe to the channel to see my latest videos." And protect her as her fiancé. She realized she was waiting for his answer, so she let go of him. He decided he could take the opportunity and quietly ask if he could go with her. But he couldn't, but saying it felt like he was just making excuses. Who was he trying to fool? Even he knew that he was just afraid. Harold steeled his resolve. He would go. For some reason, he was flustered by her appearance and didn't say a word. Alexandra thanked him for coming to get her. Harold told her that she looked very beautiful, which made her a little happy. She and Harold sat in silence, with the moonlight shining in the carriage. He would be able to do more. Harold gave her a small gift. He said it was a token of his commitment. Alexandra asked if she could open it right away, and he nodded. Inside was a beautiful necklace. Please subscribe to the channel for more new videos. Harold explained that he had chosen it because its color reminded him of her eyes. Alexandra put it on, and he asked if it looked good. Harold said, "It's perfect. I wondered if it was just because they were engaged, but I couldn't explain it. I felt that I had received a lot from her. In my heart, I wanted to ask her why she had agreed, but I couldn't bring myself to say it. So I just wondered to myself." Alexandra looked at Harold with a puzzled expression, wondering what he was thinking about so deeply. As they arrived at the Markle family estate, they saw several men who looked like knights. A little later, they saw that. They were surprised to see that Wilfred and Marion were also at the party. Harold wondered what Wilfred was doing there. Alexandra asked him again if something was wrong, but Harold said he wouldn't talk to Wilfred, and if he said anything, he would just be ignored. He also asked her not to react. Alexandra was confused. and said she understood. Suddenly, the banquet began, and someone announced the arrival of Curtis and Frederica. As the two entered, Frederica smiled and greeted the guests. Harold thought it was going to be another long night, and she looked very beautiful, like one of the heroines of the game. Alexandra then asked him if he liked girls with large chests like Frederica. Harold quickly said that wasn't it. Frederica approached them and thanked them for attending the banquet. Harold replied that they were the ones who should be thanking them for the invitation. When she turned to greet Alexandra, Frederica became silent and greeted Alexandra with a cold tone. Alexandra thanked her for the invitation. Frederica looked at her intensely and said she had heard that Alexandra had been focusing on her training. Alexandra replied that, thanks to everyone, she had been able to become a fine lady. But she still couldn't get over her rude behavior towards Harold before, and felt that she might have been rude to her as well. Frederica, however, was grateful. Something was wrong, so she moved away to greet the other guests. Harold thanked Alexandra, although she didn't understand the full reason. Meanwhile, Wilfred and Marion approached them. Harold asked her. Wilfred said he just wanted to meet and greet them. Harold replied that if he didn't have anything important to say, then he should leave. But Wilfred asked him to wait and asked him if he wasn't interested in knowing why he had been called to the party. Harold replied no and walked away with Alexandra, telling his younger brother to enjoy the party without him. Wilfred said to him. Marion and Wilfred stood still, watching as they left, with expressions of disgust. Later, on the balcony, Alexandra asked Harold if he could take a break to cool down. Harold agreed. He thought that, ever since Wilfred arrived, Alexandra's mood had changed. He remembered that she was someone whose emotions were very hard to read. He started to wonder if she could be in love with Wilfred, as was possible in the game. As it happened, Curtis approached Harold. He was surprised to see him there. Curtis asked if he was okay, and Harold replied that he was. Then he asked if he knew someone. He would have expected Wilfred to be invited as well. Curtis shared his own thoughts on the matter, if that surprised him. He replied that the king had asked him to take Wilfred into his faction. Harold didn't expect that. Curtis continued, saying that the king was worried about Wilfred's situation because he didn't have a good place in the palace. Since he couldn't help him directly due to the Fourth Queen's influence, he decided to give Curtis the task of protecting him and making sure no one could harm him easily. He also said the party was to help Wilfred by showing that he was under his protection. Then he said that he had brought him here to help. Harold usually agreed with the wishes of the Marshall family, but this time he took longer to answer. Curtis thought Harold had figured something out. Before leaving, he told him that now he had to be careful with his brother. Harold was left speechless. Later that night, he told him he would agree. Alexandra returned and asked him if something had happened. Harold told her. Alexandra wondered what the first prince was thinking. Harold didn't know either, but thought that Curtis was well aware of the danger of having Wilfred in his faction. For some reason, Harold could imagine Curtis sympathizing with the situation. He imagined his younger brother had pleaded with him, and he had accepted Wilfred as part of his faction. Alexandra now asked him what he thought about interacting with Wilfred from now on. Harold said he would do nothing, even though the things he said were terrible. They didn't love any part of him, but it was good that he loved that part of himself, and felt sorry for her. She wanted to help, but there was only one thing she could do. Alexandra smiled sadly. Harold looked at her, puzzled, and asked her what had happened between her and Wilfred. Now she knew. The moment Wilfred asked, Alexandra had replied that Wilfred was the person she hated most in the world. She had said that if she ever heard Wilfred's name again, it wouldn't make her feel any better. She had called him a despicable person. When Harold saw the hateful expression on her face, he remembered a bit about the game. That hateful expression had been directed at him after the protagonist turned against him. But now, Alexandra was looking at Wilfred like that. Alexandra told him that she would never forgive him and that every day she prayed for his downfall, and told her that, on that day, Harold was the one who saved her. her thoughts, her heart, her pride, and even her spirit. She told him the story from 2 years ago. 2 years ago, the young Alexandra had been confined to her room for a long time. She had no friends, so all she could do was read books. So, the only way to pass the time was to read. In those stories, the hero would travel to distant lands and fall in love with a prince, just like in her grandmother's stories. But one day, all of a sudden, her father came to her. Her father had just arrived with unexpected news. He said that she would be going with him to the royal palace. The king had chosen Alexandra as one of the candidates. She was excited. This was her chance to see the world beyond her manor. She dreamed of meeting a dashing prince, just like in her stories. Perhaps this would be the start of her own grand adventure. Finally, it was time to go. Alexandra realized that she was wearing clothes that looked like a boy's, instead of the beautiful dresses that her mother usually had made for a young noblewoman. Her father explained that it was an order from him. At the time, she thought it was strange, but now she thinks her father did it for a reason. Surely he wanted to make sure the prince wouldn't fall in love with her. When Alexandra arrived at the royal palace, she told him. In the city, she was fascinated by the large and fragrant flowers. She couldn't help but want to know more. While her father wasn't looking, she went deeper and deeper to explore. As she walked down the corridors, she saw a path. She felt like she was creating happy memories. She continued into the palace grounds, hoping to find something interesting. But instead, she only found a few long corridors and walls that seemed to have no end. The silence and loneliness made her weak, and soon fear paralyzed her. She couldn't move from where she was. At that moment, a young man named Wilfred led her into a room and was surprised to see someone in such a secluded place. Thinking she was a lost child, he asked her what she was doing there and offered to help her find her way back. Alexandra quickly and stubbornly said she could walk by herself. Wilfred frowned and asked for her name. She just answered, Alex. Wilfred looked at her for a moment, then turned and started walking. As he walked, he noticed her. They became Harold Welty Alvis, the third son, although that wasn't true. Alexandra followed, and, along the way, Wilfred told her that the palace grounds were very difficult to navigate. After a while, Alexandra realized that they had been walking for over an hour, and it seemed like they had gotten lost. She asked if they were really going to the right place. Wilfred told her. The attendant replied that when the king met with the nobles, he was always in an antechamber. The attendant said he was sure he was in the antechamber, then laughed and took Alexandra's hand, saying the child was in the inner courtyard. When it finally arrived, she expected to see a grand hall filled with nobles, only to find a dark and empty room. Alexandra stood there, stunned, shocked, and not knowing what to do. What was happening when the door was about to close behind her? She pushed the door open. She begged him to help her open the door. Wilfred just laughed and called her a fool. He said that he was Harold, and if she needed to blame someone, she should blame Harold. Then Wilfred left her and locked her in. Alexandra tried to force the door open, but it was useless. She was trapped. She was found alone, no longer caring about the monsters. They had abandoned everyone. Suddenly, she heard a person's voice and asked if anyone was inside. She called for help, but there was no answer. She collapsed on the ground, not knowing what to do. She started to think she would die in that room. Just then, someone knocked on the door and asked if anyone was inside. Alexandra banged on the door, and it was kicked in. The boy on the other side was surprised and asked her to stay calm. He asked her to move away from the door. Alexandra waited in silence. Soon, a loud crash echoed through the room as the door was finally broken down. Screenplay and editing by No Tanzu. He was panting and covered in sweat. He said she must have been very scared. Harold apologized for not coming sooner. When she had calmed down, she said it was nothing. She wasn't hurt anymore and offered her a handkerchief. To Alexandra, Harold seemed like a hero. She thanked him for coming to save her. Harold looked puzzled and started to ask what had happened. Alexandra told him. Alexandra explained everything that had happened to her, including how someone had tricked her. She also said that a boy had told her. He said that if she wanted to blame someone, she should blame Harold. Harold looked even more confused. Alexandra then asked him if he knew him from before. He started to say he didn't know the answer, but then he admitted something rather strange. He really was Harold. Alexandra was surprised to find out there were two Harolds. At that moment, one of the chandeliers began to fall towards them. Alexandra's eyes widened and she wondered, because she didn't feel any pain. When she opened them wide, she saw Harold was safe. He was holding up the massive chandelier with his bare hands. But Alexandra was focused on Harold, who was trying to hold up the falling chandelier. Just then, her father arrived, calling her name in a worried voice. Alexandra was focused on Harold. She told him she would help Harold. Seeing Harold like that, her father also got worried and started to help. After her father helped them, Alexandra asked Harold if he was okay. Still panting, Harold said he was fine and had to keep going. Alexandra said he was still injured and tried to help him, but her father stopped her and told her to let him go with the boy. As her father spoke, he put a hand on Harold's shoulder. And just like that, Harold walked out of the room. Alexandra was worried, her hand magically reaching out. Harold had left. Later, she learned the truth about Harold's real position in the royal palace and why her father had let him go. She was stopped before she could follow him. Harold found out that he didn't have the blessing of the Haybelts, a blessing of the gods, a special power developed only by true strength. That's why no one acknowledged him. No one had tried to understand. But Alexandra saw him differently. To Alexandra, Harold was a strong, kind, and noble person. She realized that Harold was a good person. He was a truly amazing person. She felt hurt and saddened because everyone had treated him so cruelly. She couldn't apologize for the way they had acted. That became her reason to become stronger and to be able to stand by his side. After all, she had seen all of it. Harold had saved her that day. Harold started to laugh. Alexander knew that he was never a good person. He was a villain, yes, but he was her villain. And, for her, was someone irreplaceable. She squeezed his hand even tighter and said that being his fiancé was what truly made her happy. Harold continued to laugh and tease Alexandra, laughing even louder. Thank you for watching and see you again, but was still overwhelmed by that power. Alexandra was the only one who had truly seen him that way. Then, Harold's eyes sharpened and said he was just laughing because he remembered something funny. But in reality, it wasn't just that. Alexandra smiled like a loved one, and Harold looked flustered with embarrassment. So, without warning, Alexandra fainted. He caught her just in time, his heart pounding. He didn't know when it happened, but at that moment, he knew he had to protect this girl, no matter the cost. Why do you keep pushing yourself so hard for me? He wondered, holding her close. You're just going to get hurt. And talk more with his brother. Still, he thought it was best to stay away from Wilfred. Alexandra agreed and said Wilfred didn't need to stay away from him. He wasn't worthy of any of Harold's time or attention. But if Harold decided to answer his brother's call, Alexandra wanted to stay by his side. Harold let out a small laugh and said he had already thought about it. He took her hand and thanked her. Thank you, he said, his voice sincere. Thank you for everything. Harold felt that he had done what he needed to do with just a little introduction and wanted to go home. But Alexandra said it was still too early to go. Harold said that. He remembered that Alexandra also didn't like attending banquets, so he felt something was different. So he asked her if she wanted to go through the tower later. He thought that Monica and Cass wanted to hear about her day and also wanted to spend some time with her. Alexandra was about to leave, but she quickly agreed and said they should go home right away. Harold started to get nervous again and said that maybe they should inform the organizers first, but Alexandra said they didn't have time for that. In that moment, Harold saw two of them in pain. The two older brothers were talking to each other. It was the strangest thing. It was the first time he had seen them talk, even if it was just once. It was Prince Cardis and Prince Raphael. They were smiling and chatting as if they were the best of friends, a sight so strange it sent a shiver down Harold's spine. But he still had a fresh face. Harold asked if his face really looked that bad. Alexander said yes. It was like Heinz looking at his brothers in Britain. Harold apologized. "I will respond with a little evacuation," and asked him if he practiced like that because of her request before. Harold said it wasn't for that reason, but deep down he knew it was. Alexander couldn't help but stare and blush. She took him by the hand and suggested they go home. As they were heading out, someone called out to Alexandra and asked if she was leaving already. The voice was from a man. Harold was surprised that someone had the nerve to approach someone as beautiful as Alexandra. Due to her status, she called her brother Big Brother. Harold didn't look well and tried to say hello, but was naturally shot down. His eyes landed on her in an instant. The man was Cedric, Alexandra's older brother. He and Harold bumped into each other, but Cedric didn't apologize. Instead, he glared at Harold and pushed past him with enough force to nearly knock him over. Angered, Alexandra demanded to know what he was doing. His brother was doing at the banquet. Cedric replied that he had been invited by Cardis. Before, he hadn't intended to go, but when he found out about this, he became curious about Cardis. He had heard rumors about Harold and wanted to see the man who would marry his sister for himself. Of Alexandra's story, Cedric always tried to get between them. He was the most overprotective and annoying brother who made everything difficult. Alexandra only heard what she wanted to and quickly pulled away from Harold. Cedric called out to her, asking her to wait. With teary eyes, she said it had been a long time since she had seen him, and asked him not to leave like that. Alexandra told him he had no reason to talk to him. Cedric tried to calm his sister down and assumed she had come because she needed a favor. He reminded her that he was still the next in line to lead the Chevalier family. Alexandra said that her only wish was for her brother to disappear. Cedric said that was not the name he had placed his bet on. He replied that since the third prince, Harold, had faced Alexandra, the eldest daughter of the Chevalier family, his view on the power balance in the fight for the throne had changed a lot. Harold understood exactly what Cedric was trying to say. If he wanted to maintain his position in the palace, he needed the support of the Chevalier family. That meant Harold had to maintain a good relationship with the next head of the family. She could imagine that Cedric's support could be important, but she wondered why Cedric was only now offering it. So, she realized that Cedric had received a request. Cedric confirmed it. Cardis had laughed and asked him to support Harold from now on, as they would soon be family. Still, Cedric had no plans to find out. In the fight for the throne, but if his beloved little sister asked, then he would try to help. Alexandra wanted to say that they could handle everything by themselves, but was happy to know her brother's intentions. Harold thought that to survive in the world of Anessa, he needed to have the backing of the Chevalier family. That meant having Cedric on his side, and that was the best option. Everyone saw Harold bow his head and ask for Cedric's help. With that, he could only repay the Chevalier family. If that was the option, I would help. If it meant avoiding a tragic end with Alexandra, Harold didn't care about his pride. His pride had been lost a long time ago. To be sure, in front of everyone, Cedric agreed and promised to help Harold, but with one condition. First, Cedric apologized for what he had said. Then, Cedric informed everyone that Harold was a foolish and pitiful villain. Her mood was terrible. Cedric agreed that Harold was facing the consequences of his choice. Alexandra glared at her brother and asked him if he was feeling well. Cedric, clearly unhappy, quickly said it wasn't his idea. Everyone had clearly heard Harold's words, and everyone there. Cedric replied that he wanted Harold to prove himself because he needed to know the truth. Thank him for making Harold a trustworthy man for his sister. Harold remembered that that scene had also happened in the game with Cedric. If he won the duel, Cedric would approve of his sister's engagement. But in the game, Cedric had been helped. In the original story, Harold loses this duel miserably, cementing his reputation as a weakling. At that moment, Alexandra said it wasn't necessary to rely on her brother's help. She thought she could handle the situation if Harold really wanted help for her family. Cedric naturally felt that his position as the future head of the family was being challenged, and her family were being destroyed. Still, Harold stepped forward and agreed to Cedric's duel. He asked if he just wanted to know if he was good enough for Alexandra. Alexandra started to worry. Cedric smiled and told Harold he would have to show him his resolve. He also knew that Harold needed time to prepare, so he proposed the duel would take place in a month at the family's estate. Harold said he didn't care. Alexandra tried to stop them, but Cedric stepped forward and said he would wait for the duel in a month. As her brother left, Alexandra told her fiancé that fighting her brother with his current strength was almost impossible. Harold agreed that it felt that way. Alexandra, in pain, asked him why he had agreed to the challenge when he knew he couldn't win. Harold said he couldn't do that. He thought there was no turning back. If he wanted to choose his own destiny, protect Alexandra, and avoid a bad ending, then he had to keep moving forward. He wanted to see what would happen if they faced each other. Alexandra called him a fool and ran to him. Harold knew he was in over his head. A while later, Harold sat there, completely defeated after another grueling training session. Alexandra looked down and asked Monica something. Monica wasn't sure about Alexandra. So, Alexandra said Harold was no longer in love. "I'll do it," she declared. It was certain that her analytical ability had reached its limit. Alexandra said it was time to focus on her core training and thought it was the best time to make a change. When Harold looked closely, he recognized a better name, had realized something important, and was finally ready to proceed with the next part of his plan. They fell silent and told the girls his idea about her training, although he admitted that it was more of a request than a command. Alexandra was intrigued and asked what he was talking about. Harold announced that in her next battles, he wanted to help. You can use the black shield of Sabache Kasparvik. Because he couldn't use special skills, the black shield was the only thing Sabache could rely on. Then, Sabache went to CAS and asked them if they could start training together from then on. CAS agreed, and quickly jumped onto Harold's desk. They remembered that, after all, they were partners. Alexandra said it was a fresh idea to use the shield. They laughed and told Harold. Harold wasn't worried. She would make it stronger, no matter what happened. When the training was over, Harold took his leave of Alexandra. But she said she would come again the next day. She promised to come see him. After she left, Harold spoke to Monica and made a request. Harold knew it was time to return to his home, but as he started on his way, someone blocked his path. Harold stopped in the rain. It was Wilfred, Harold's rival, of his lady. Wilfred asked where his lady had gone. Harold replied that it was none of his business. Then, he was now officially Cardis's fiancé and companion. Both he and his lady had given their consent. A strange silence fell. Harold was suspicious, sensing that this seemingly chance encounter was a calculated move. He worried as Wilfred's expression darkened. Wilfred's smile vanished. He told Harold he needed to protect Cardis. Wilfred knew the day of the duel was approaching, because his brother had never said that Harold was his right-hand man. Harold looked a little confused and asked if Cardis had lost his mind, as he had never said or done anything like that. In fact, Wilfred was banking on this speech. At that moment, Harold knew it was a complete fabrication. His plan was to use Harold. Harold had concluded that they were setting Cardis up, had censored Cardis's words, and had not checked to see if it was true. To make that choice, Harold said he would only believe those words if they came from Cardis himself. He also warned Wilfred not to talk to him. Still, Harold figured out his whole situation. However, in the original story, Wilfred was the hero. But now, with the attitude he had shown Alexandra, it seemed like Wilfred was becoming a person like Harold's villainous character. Wilfred had said all these things. He had the right to speak like that, because he was now Cardis's right-hand man. He felt that if Harold, as a prince, continued to act like that, he would set a bad example for others. He told him to step down, but Harold saw everyone's disappointment. Wilfred was just trying to justify something and needed someone to blame. Harold remembered that he was called the demon villain, so there was no point in worrying about his reputation now. Then, the conversation ended and he left Wilfred and his maid speechless. Wilfred started to look surprised. Monica, the maid, asked if she should kill Wilfred, but Harold told her to wait. From that day on, Harold started training with Sarah, along with Alexandra. Monica also joined in to become a training partner in the defensive part. As expected, Harold had a hard time, but he didn't give up. He was a true warrior. His determination was absolute, and he would give his life for his family. With a cruel look, in a moment, Harold was hit with one hand. The impact was immense, and he could taste blood. He knew this level of training would break an ordinary person. Harold was finished. While still on the ground, Harold smiled and said it wasn't over yet. That was exactly what Alexandra wanted from her fiancé. She smiled broadly and promised that one day she would defeat her brother. Her smile gave Harold a moment of surprise. Not long after, Harold became a man. Harold and his party headed to the Chevalier family's lands. Cass said that things had gotten really fun. Harold agreed with a wry smile, although his trembling hands betrayed his nervousness. Then, he took Alexandra's hand and started walking, and said that everything he had experienced in the last few weeks had led him to this moment. He promised that he would not lose, no matter what happened. Alexandra let out a small laugh and squeezed his hand. In his mind, Harold just wanted to run. After running, he started to look for a shield. After all, he was the weakest villain in the game and now had to face Cedric, the user known as the game's strongest warrior. Harold knew he had almost no chance, but he had to fight. Then, in his camp, Cedric said it was time to begin. As stated before, Cedric wanted to test Harold's strength. Cedric suggested they have a duel with wooden swords to see if Harold had the strength. Looking closely, Harold recognized Cedric's sword. The sword was Carnwenin, a legendary blade passed down through the Chevalier family. This was no mere training sword. But it wasn't just a friendly duel. Cedric really wanted to win. If Harold wasn't careful, he could get seriously injured or worse. While facing the danger, Harold kept a young name. He accepted the challenge. He agreed to fight Cedric and asked him to bring it on. Cass said he would do it because they were partners. Harold took his stance and got ready, and Cass transformed into a massive shield. Cedric looked a little worried and asked Harold what he was planning to do. "You have to live with a beautiful base," Harold replied with a smirk. "Yes." Cedric reminded him that it was his choice and warned him not to regret it. Harold said he was ready. With Cass by his side, he thought he could win. She had promised herself that she would defeat Cedric and would ensure that her relationship with him was approved. When Monica gave the signal, Cedric moved in quickly. Harold was stunned by his speed, realizing Cedric must have used a powerful buffing skill. Still, Harold kept his cool and blocked his attack with the shield. Cedric stepped back a little, impressed. Harold was also surprised, not expecting to have such power. It was not only because of Cass, but also because he had been training with Alexandra, and his strength had increased significantly. His reflexes were sharper, and his body moved with a newfound confidence. Harold, fast and strong blows came one after another as Harold raised his guard to block them. He felt his energy draining away. With each block strike, Cedric laughed and mockingly asked him if he couldn't keep up. Though he looked back, Harold was being pushed back by a relentless and ruthless Cedric. He stood against everything he could and blocked with the shield. The sound of their weapons clashing echoed through the training ground. He didn't expect Harold to have such strength. Meanwhile, CIA predicted the end. The fight was reaching its climax. One final move would decide it all. Thank you all for watching, and please subscribe to the channel. He felt terrible. Harold didn't want to win like that. He had trained hard to defeat Cedric without using Snatch. Harold wanted to win for real and do it all for Alexandra. Cedric regained his composure in the fight. I just need to keep up, Harold thought, and I'll get used to the pain. Then I'll turn this around. They clashed, but Harold was able to block them with his shield. He quickly apologized to Cass, who knew that he couldn't stop. It was just a part of keeping up with his partner's speed. Harold called Cass the best partner anyone could ask for. He meant it. He began another challenge, but Harold was ready. He decided to block Harold no matter what. The two young men began their challenge. And in that moment, Cedric's sword flew out of his hand. Cedric was surprised, and Harold took the opportunity to strike him with his shield. In no time, he had hit him like this. Cedric fell to the ground. Harold took a deep breath and looked at him, thinking he had won the duel. After the fight, Cedric still said that real talent wasn't talent, not only in battle, but also in household matters. Harold told her not to think that fighting could solve everything. Alexandra said her brother was young and asked him to acknowledge the strength of her fiancé. Finally, Cedric admitted that he had lost. Just as Harold had expected, Cedric was still very worried about his sister, even though he acted like a jerk. Cedric was still the Cedric that Harold remembered from the game. Meanwhile, Cedric remembered Harold's words, that what Cedric had said was not out of malice. Cedric said that Harold's final attack was too strong and was afraid that this attack would not be used. It wouldn't work well in a real fight. Cedric suggested that Harold should think of the weapon as a sword. Harold said there was no need. Cedric asked if Harold only used the weapon because he had to. Harold replied that that wasn't the reason. He admitted that he couldn't use a sword, a spear, or any other weapon, but for him that was fine. He had Alexandra as his sword, Monica as his spear, and had for many years before. He didn't need anything else, just a shield to protect them. Yes, his duty was to protect them. That was why he chose to bring them here. Cedric started to understand better and humbly asked Harold if he could trust him to take care of his sister. Harold agreed and said he looked forward to the future with him. Cedric turned back to him and again asked him to protect Alexandra from now on. A few days after the duel, Cedric was still heavy-hearted in the training center. He was worried about her relationship, knowing that Alexandra had feelings for an unworthy prince. The engagement with the royal family could not be changed. Furthermore, only one person in the royal family was considered a good match for his sister. So, in the end, the engagement wasn't the real problem. The problem was Harold. All the nobles in the country knew about Harold's name. As the demon villain, he had no semblance of a knight or talent, as his name suggested. But now Cedric knew that wasn't the case. But that wasn't the truth. He remembered the duel, when Harold had clearly shown his pride and strength as his sister's future husband. That was something that Cedric had lost that day, and he couldn't take it back. The image of Harold standing strong, protecting his sister, was burned into his mind. He couldn't deny the boy's resolve. He had agreed with me. So, from that moment on, he had decided that he would evaluate Harold. If he could find the slightest reason to believe that Harold was not good enough for his sister, he would use all the power of the Chevalier house to destroy them. In the meantime, as he evaluated Harold, he found the best reason to find a reason for his sister. Alexandra was the most lively she'd ever been, laughing and cheering for Harold. It was clear that fighting was what made her feel most alive. Monica didn't object to that, but said that Harold seemed a little surprised. In her story, Monica offered to help with Harold's meal. Alexandra tried to stop her, but Harold had made up his mind that he wanted to eat alone. At that moment, a maid came and said that Cardis was looking for him. Harold imagined it was because of his fear and hoped they would punish him for doing something terrible. He told the maid that he would go see his brother right away. She quickly said she wanted to go with him as his fiancé. She also thought that the reason her brother was at her house was because of her family. Harold realized that she wanted to go with him so that her brother wouldn't be too hard on him. Her mind was racing. Alexandra asked if something was wrong, but Harold said it was nothing. Monica joked that he should be more honest with his feelings. The couple then left. Please subscribe to the channel for more new videos. He didn't know why they had called him. They asked him what he expected when he abandoned his group, waiting for him, especially since he had never done much. Cardis couldn't believe that Harold would try to join the fight for the throne in a single move. Harold replied, asking what someone like him could do in Cardis's faction. Cardis reminded him. You remember, Harold had argued with his mother and said he couldn't believe Harold would join the fight for the throne like that. Harold asked another question, even though it was about his mother. Why had Cardis let Wilfred join his faction? You remember that Wilfred was his mother's rival, and he couldn't believe she knew about it. Cardis said that. He said frankly that he would talk to the queen later, but Harold had made up his mind. He didn't want to help Cardis anymore. To be precise, he didn't want to help a brother who would never accept Wilfred. Cardis was speechless, but Harold had returned with Alexandra and Wilfred, and apologized for making her witness a family fight. He asked her to go with him. Cardis told her to stop, and warned him not to leave. Still, Harold and Alexandra left the room. Just when Harold thought the hard part was over, a young man approached and said he had been waiting for him. Harold recognized the young man. It was Raphael. The young man gave a strange smile, and finally was certain that trouble was brewing.